Evening, councillors, officers and members of the public. Before we commence the meeting, could I draw to your attention the fire regulations on the screen behind me, and I hope on that screen there. If you hear the fire alarm, please will you identify now your nearest exit, make your way downstairs, and we meet over under the canopy at Waitrose. It is a hot evening in here tonight, so if gentlemen would like to remove their jackets, do feel free. And I'm sorry there's no signing in sheet, but you are being recorded, so Emma will have it in hand, but there's no place for you to sign in at the moment. Could I ask you all to please make sure that your phones are turned off or switched to silent? And councillors, can you make sure that your card is firmly into your console so that we can hear you on the webcast? Members of the public, can I just remind you again that this is a meeting in public, not a public meeting, and we welcome your contributions during your public speaking slot, but please don't join in the debate when the council are debating any matters. Officers, could I introduce the officers that we have with us this evening? A long shift for them all. On my far right is Lewis Jones from the Legal Department. Then we have Steve Weaver, the Interim Head of Development Control, Louise Yandell, the Area Team Leader for Southern and Western, Jane McMullen and Chris Turner, who are presenting the applications tonight. So can we move straight on then to the items of business? The minutes have been laid on the table for the last half an hour. Is it your wish that I sign them at the end of the meeting?
Agreed.
Apologies for absence, Emma.
We have apologies from councillors Stephen Hill and Pat Frost.
Thank you very much. And any declarations of interest other than the Farnham Town Council standing? Right, nobody has any other interest to declare. Questions from members of the public, Emma?
None received, Chairman.
Sorry, any relevant updates, Steve, to government guidance or legislation?
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, just to draw members' attention, you may not have seen it. I sent an email round earlier this afternoon regarding an update as regards the Habitats Directive and its implications for this evening's meeting. There's been a recent European Court of Justice ruling relating to the Habitats Directive, and in particular about how plans and projects need to be screened in relation to their potential impact, and that includes our SPAs, amongst other things. The ruling has potentially important consequences for how we process current planning applications, and whilst we will be feeding back to you the implications in the coming days, in the meantime we have withdrawn two of the items from your agenda this evening, that being Corner Cottage and 38 Brooklands Road, whilst those considerations are underway. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Steve. It's a long evening and I don't intend to open a debate on that tonight. We will await information and then we'll have a debate at the correct time. Moving on then to performance against government targets, Steve.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Taking members to page 5 of your agenda papers. So this now reflects the end of year results in terms of how your planning service has performed in relation to the two key government factors of speed and quality. I'll take you first to speed, and you can see that for the year just gone, really excellent results across the board, in excess of 97% in respect of major application determination on time, and in excess of 98% in respect of non-majors. That reflects an awful lot of hard work on behalf of your officers and no doubt yourselves as well, and really is an excellent set of results for the council. Turning to the performance in relation to quality, I'll start with non-majors, and you can see there the government has a target of 10% or less in terms of overturns at appeal as a proportion of all decisions made, and for the assessment period that was undertaken between 2015 and 2017, we were down at about 1.5%, so comfortably within the target range, and we've maintained that for the last year. That isn't the current assessment period. That's just sort of gives you an idea of our current direction of travel, so no great change and very safe. Majors, of course, at appeal have been more of a concern for us. We did see a recent run of decisions that have supported the council's position following its adoption of the local plan. That's really encouraging, I think, for us all. And as a result, the statistics as they sit for the assessment period are below the threshold for designation. We've only got one appeal outstanding now from that that potentially affecting that period. And in terms of the year just gone, again, it's not the current assessment period, but you can see statistically we are within that 10% target range. So again, promising and encouraging position for us. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Steve. Once again, I don't really want to debate on this, but if anybody has anything they wish to ask or comment on. Councillor MacLeod.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a quick question. I've never noticed before, it's probably been before, the reference to the county matters. Could you just clarify if that has any effect on our figures? I presume it doesn't, but presumably the county matters don't affect our figures at all.
Correct. The county matter applications are those which are determined by Surrey County Council, so they won't be ones that we determine at all, and so they won't be factored into our results.
Right, if everyone's happy, can we move on then to the applications for planning permission? If any site inspections are needed as a result of consideration of the applications this evening, they'll be held on Tuesday the 5th of June at a time to be agreed. So moving on then, please, to item A3, WA 2018-0237, which is land to the north of 25 Three Stars Road, Farnham, and this is the erection of a storage building. And Jane McMullen is going to introduce this for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. The application site is located to the north of Three Styles Road, to the rear of number 25, which is also owned by the applicant. So this is the site in question. This site is also owned by the applicant. The site currently comprises a long, narrow, rectangular field. The field is surrounded by wooden picket fencing. Three Styles Road to the south is residential in character, and the area surrounding the site to the north, east, and west is open and rural in character. The site can be seen from the following photographs. Photograph A looks south from the field towards number 25 Three Styles Road. Photograph B looks north and shows the site and a wooded area further to the north. Photograph C shows the northeast of the site where there is another open field, and photo D shows the adjacent field to the northwest of the site. Photograph E shows the access to number 25 and the current boundary between the two properties owned by the applicant. Photograph F looks to the south of the site and the site's further down Three Styles Road. Photograph G shows where the proposed shed would be erected under the cover of some trees to slightly reduce some of the visual prominence. It's very small, but the proposed shed in question is there. The floor plan of the proposed shed would be about 6.5 metres wide and about 5.4 metres deep. The central cavity of the shed would be enclosed in timber cladding. The two outer sides would be left open to provide log storage, reducing some of its bulk as it's not all contained. In conclusion, the principle of constructing a tractor shed for the maintenance of agricultural land is considered acceptable, and in its siting and design, the proposal is not considered to have any harmful impacts on the countryside beyond the Greenbelt, AGLV or AHLV, nor would it prejudice residential amenity given its small size. As such, planning permission is recommended for approval. The matters of principle or technical opinion are the impact on the ancient woodland and the effect on the SPA. The matters of judgment, which members are now asked to consider, are the impacts on visual amenity and landscape. In terms of this, officers consider that the proposed shed would be of an acceptable rural design for an agricultural storage building and of a modest size so as to not compromise residential amenity. As such, it is recommended for approval. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Jane. This application is subject to public speaking. Could I ask the objector, Mrs. Bell, if she'd come forward, please? I think you've been here before, Mrs. Bell, but it's 4 minutes from when you press the long button.
Good evening, Madam Chairman and Councillors. I'm sorry to be here this evening to object to the application submitted by my neighbour to build a substantial secure shed cum garage on agricultural land to the rear of Three Styles Road, Farnham, which he has recently purchased and which abuts his garden of roughly half an acre upon which he could easily build his garage, notwithstanding that this land has covenants placed upon it prohibiting all and any buildings. The land in question is described as being countryside beyond the built-up area boundary, a boundary which has recently been reaffirmed by the council. It is situated adjacent to Claypit ancient woodland and is in sight of the AGLV. It has been used as agricultural land for hundreds of years and is part of the historic deer park associated with Farnham Castle. Over the last few years, numerous planning applications have sought to wipe aside protections previously afforded precious countryside, and those which have succeeded have produced great financial benefits to the few. We all know that once the principle of development has been won, then the floodgates will be unlocked, and indeed, who could blame anyone for taking advantage of such financial opportunity and such disregard for planning rules and boundaries? Opportunity which would be detrimental to the whole of Farnham, whose residents show solidarity in wishing to protect the beautiful countryside trusted to the care of the local council and their planning department. The land in question forms part of a large 5-acre area upon which the principle of development would be catastrophic. It is time that the planning department appreciate that it is their responsibility to give a higher priority to protecting land, precious land which cannot be replaced. This application clearly conflicts with national and local planning policies, and I am quite honestly disgusted that it has been necessary for it to come before the committee at all. I wish to take this moment to thank local councillors for their efforts in trying to uphold established boundaries and rules, and hope that this application will be refused on all grounds possible so as to discourage reapplication. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Bell. If I could ask Mr. Liedel now, who is a supporter of the application, to come and speak to us.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for inviting me to, allowing me to address the committee. I represent the applicants. This is a very straightforward matter. It's a very small storage shed to be used solely for the effective maintenance of the identified land. As set out in your officer's report, the proposal complies with your local plan and neighbourhood plan policies. It is visually discreet and mirrors other similar buildings in the vicinity. The design and materials palette are wholly appropriate to the semi-rural setting, and I therefore urge you to grant planning permission in accordance with your officer's recommendation. In response to the objector's comments, I make the following brief observations. I don't think the shed, while a matter of judgment, can reasonably be described as substantial. Secondly, covenants are not relevant as a material planning consideration in this instance. And thirdly, it's pure speculation as to the future development of the surrounding land. What you are required to determine is what is before you. It's a modest, timber-clad storage building for rural purposes. It is not contrary to the relevant policies. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Liedel. Just before I open it to the committee, could I just ask the officers a question about the conditions? The third condition is that the use of the shed shall only be in association with the agricultural use of the field and no other purpose. Can we make that condition stick? Is it a condition that can be put aside further down the line is really what I'm asking. How firm is that condition in protecting the future use of this shed?
I mean, what that condition does is require the building to only be used in association with the agricultural use of the land. What I think you might be asking is can they potentially change the use under permitted development rights? And that wouldn't bite for that reason. However, if members felt that that was necessary, then we could strengthen that, that particular condition by removing the relevant class of the general permitted development order, which allows the change of use from agricultural buildings to residential.
Thank you, Louise. With that in mind, I'll throw it open to councillors. Councillor Hyman.
Thank you. If I open the batting, because I'm a ward councillor for Castle Ward. This was called in because it's obviously something which is of some local concern, and we didn't feel that it would look right for it just to be done behind closed doors by the officers. So it's in front of you. Councillor Williamson called this one in before, but is no longer a member, but I don't oppose the calling in any way, so we're quite happy that it's before us. Now, if we can move on to what's in front of us. The issues that have been highlighted, page 60-something, wasn't it? We've got, I won't repeat what has been said by the objectors on page 64 and 65 and the comments that have been made by Mr. Leedale here as well. This is not something which, where we can decide that we want to stop it because we are concerned that development is going to be there in the future. That will be down to policy in future, and personally today, as we've just heard earlier, and that you won't allow debate on, Chairman, there are now far stricter controls on development in Farnham following a recent court judgment. So that's less of a concern perhaps for people who are objecting to this. My concern really is the issue of the AGLV, and I simply see that as being it's very subjective. It's whether you think it does. Officers obviously are saying that they are quite happy that this is not going to infringe upon the AGLV and views, and I think objectors are saying that yes, it will. I'm going to sit on the fence on this one. I'm afraid. Well. I'm entitled to, because I have recently learned that I know actually both sides of the story on this. I know the applicant only from 20 years ago, and I also know one of the objectors. So, I don't want to be seen to be favouring.
Can I just interrupt you here, because you really ought to have declared an interest if your knowledge of these people is sufficient for you not to vote. So, do be careful. You're treading a very fine line here. There's a difference between knowing people. I appreciate
that, and I am explaining that, Chairman. No, in actual fact, they hardly recognised me. It was from 20 years ago from children's school from one of the sides, and the other is an objector who turns up here regularly. That neither of them are. I don't meet in my private life or anything like that, and never have. So it isn't that. But as far as this is concerned, I find this incredibly difficult because I understand the arguments of both sides, but I don't think that if I were to refuse this, I'm not entirely sure that it would get past a planning inspector. I'm going to have to. I would like to have this refused on because of creeping development, but I don't think we can. So I'm going to sit on the fence myself, but I'll see what. That's where I stand at the moment. But I will listen to what the other members say. Thanks.
You're sitting on the fence and standing at the moment, so good trick if you can do it. Councillor Lear.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, I think you've made all the arguments for me. Thank you, Councillor Hyman. This is an agricultural site. It's lawfully such, and actually I note from the report that there are also other buildings, wooden buildings on the other areas of that land as well. I don't share the worries of creeping development. This is purely a shed for storage and stated as such, albeit I think we could robustly or more robustly strengthen condition 3, and I'll be a supporter of that. But otherwise, I can see no reason to go against the recommendation with this application. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Hodge.
Actually, Councillor Lear's just said exactly what I was going to say. This is a small shed. to keep equipment in. I cannot imagine why we're sitting here debating this, really, and I certainly support the application.
Does anyone else wish to speak, or shall we move to the recommendation with the strength and condition? Councillor MacLeod?
Yeah, I'd like to make a couple of points. I don't think it's that small, actually. It's 21 feet long by 17 feet wide, and this is to house a tractor, grass-cutting type tractor, presumably. And approximately half of the size of this shed seems to be devoted to log storage. I'm not sure what log storage has got to do with the maintenance of the land. If this shed is entirely for the purpose of maintenance of the land, why is half of the shed devoted to log storage? And why is it so big? Even the middle bit is very big for a small agricultural type or grass cutting tractor. The other thing that puzzles me is the statement from the applicant on page 65, where they say they would like to house it at the bottom of the garden, but they can't do because of an objection from Waverley Ridge Residents Association, who have rights over Three Styles Road. Now, if Waverley Ridge Residents Association can stop them putting this shed and the tractor at the end of their garden, why doesn't it stop them putting it a few feet away and just within the field? I don't understand that. I'm just puzzled by that statement altogether. If they would prefer to put the thing at the end of the garden, which would seem to be a much better idea, why can't they do that?
I think it's the access, Councillor MacLeod, for the tractor.
But if they can't have access to the end of the garden, how are they going to get access to the bottom of the field?
Well, that's what they always say. No, you can get yourself into the field. It's whether you can get your tractor through the boundary, isn't it?
I'm sorry, I don't understand what's being said here. That it's been said that they can't get the tractor into the end of their garden. So how are they going to get the tractor into the field a few feet away?
I mean, the tractor will be living in the field and used in the field, presumably. Would you like to explain this?
Thank you, Chairman. There is a rather lengthy way to be able to access the site, which is currently used at present. It sort of involves going the whole way back down here and accessing the field via this way. So it is available. It's just arduous and presumably would be preferable to access from their own site onto the site in question.
Yeah.
Could you turn your microphone off, Mr. MacLeod? Sure, Councillor MacLeod.
Sorry.
Unless you want to come up, but surely you can't have too many more questions on a shed, can you?
I just think it's far too big, and I don't actually think it's being used for agricultural purposes. If half of the shed is being used for log storage, I haven't had an answer to that point.
Thank you very much. Councillor Potts?
No, it's fine. I think I'd just be happy to move to the recommendation.
Councillor Nazir?
All the questions have been answered, Madam Chairman, and I think I would go for the application to be recommended by me. Thank you.
Councillor Ward?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Well, Arsenal aren't playing today, so I'm not in a mad hurry. I just have a question. The Town Council says this is against policy FNP 10 of the Farnham Neighbourhood Plan, and I've not heard a comment from the officers that that is incorrect. Could they actually tell me about that? And having just heard this strange thing that you can have it on one side of a fence but not on the other side of the fence, I do remain baffled about the access issue.
Yes, please, Louise.
Thank you, Chairman. Ultimately, FNP 10 seeks to protect the countryside from inappropriate development, and inappropriate development in the countryside is a matter of judgment. In officers' view, the shed is characteristic in a rural landscape, and there are other examples of similar sheds in fields to the west of the site. So it is our officers' opinion that it isn't harmful to the countryside. However, it is a matter of judgment, and the Town Council are, of course, entitled to come to a different view. Thank you.
I think one thing we can say is that we would find it very difficult to defend it on appeal. And I think basically I would rather strengthen, the description of the shed at this stage rather than not. So before we put the recommendation, could you just explain again how condition 3 could be strengthened?
So what we would specifically do is remove permitted development rights, which are set out within a certain class. Apologies, I can't remember the exact class, but I will be able to look that up and add that to the reason for refusal. But that class of the general permitted development order, and that would prevent any future change of use under permitted development rights through the prior approval process.
Can we then go to the recommendation here, that the recommendation is subject to conditions 1 to 3 on page 71, and number 3 is now a strengthened condition, removing permitted development rights so that they can't just change the use. There's informatives 1 and 2 also on page 72, that permission be granted. Could I see all those in favour of granting permission with those conditions?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
And all those against granting permission?
3.
And any abstentions? Thank you very much. So that application is granted. Thank you very much. If we move on then to the last application, A4, WA 2018 02222. This is the land north of the property known as Broddick Farmhouse, Lower Hale Farnham. I think we all know where this is exactly, and it's Chris Turner who is going to present this application.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd just like to draw everyone's attention to the update sheet which related to, which amends condition 1 of this permission. We received some appropriately scaled drawings to the application once the report had been written. Okay. The application site measures 0.26 hectares and is located north of Hotel Danielle. The site comprises an access track which is shared with the hotel, an area of hard standing and a small area of grass field. Photograph 1 is looking southwest, shows the support trailer. Photograph 2, also looking southwest, shows the vending trailer. And photograph 3, looking northeast, shows the site in relation to the hotel, the hotel and the residential property located just south of the application site. Photograph 4 shows a site looking south. You can just about see that the top of the support trailer in that photograph. The site comprises of the vending trailer and the support trailer. They're utilitarian in form and temporary in character owing to their use and purpose as transportable units. The matters of principle on this application are the impact on the Thames Basin Heath, heritage impacts, highways and parking provision, and biodiversity. The matters of judgment relate to the location of development, the loss of the agricultural use, the impact on visual amenity in the landscape, the impact on residential amenity, and the economic benefits of the scheme. Overall, officers consider that the change in use and siting of the units would be harmful to the intrinsic character and beauty of the countryside and the AGLV and the area of high landscape value and sensitivity. However, the application is seeking a 3-month permission, and officers consider that the economic benefits of the scheme would outweigh the harm identified for this short period of time. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chris. There are no public speakers or no names down on this one, so straight over to the committee to discuss this matter. Councillor Potts.
Thank
Thank you, Chairman. As one of the ward councillors, I called this in. Myself and I know some of the other local councillors have had numerous dealings with this issue since Domino's moved into this field before Christmas. And I have to say, as a national chain, I think they should be absolutely ashamed of themselves, ashamed of the cost to officers, cost of officer time, and the fact that we're even having to sit here and discuss this tonight. This has gone on now for over 6 months, and enforcement have been involved. I know it's now come as a planning matter. They've now put in a retrospective planning permission and asked for a 3-month supposed extension. I think everyone's been more than patient with them. We've had continual abuse of enforcement conditions, the noise from their fans, their generators and so forth, the refrigerated units. I know standing at the church back at Christmas, the noise was absolutely horrendous, floodlights across the fields, and quite frankly, I think they should be ashamed of themselves. I think it's very telling that no one from Domino's has even shown their face here tonight. Quite frankly, I don't know where to go with this. I'm very keen that we do all we can to support business within Farnham. I know that we need to do everything we can. They knew the Woolmead was going to close. It didn't just suddenly happen. I understand that they have now identified other premises within Farnham. Supposedly that's still going to take them another 3 months to get that resolved. My concern is where they really are on that application. Is it going to be 3 months? As far as I'm concerned, I'm very, very uncomfortable about this. It does not sit well. I would really appreciate the views and thoughts of my fellow councillors on it. I'm not minded to support it. And as I say, I think it's very telling that no one from Domino's has made any representation or bothered to show themselves tonight to even start to explain themselves. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Potts. It's certainly been an application, an item that has been constant in my emails just recently. I was just going to ask the officers just to give an update on the other planning application for the premises. That doesn't take away any of what you've said so far, but as you mentioned, it will just get the clarification.
Yeah, so planning permission was granted on the 22nd of February for change of use from a restaurant to A5 takeaway at 13 East Street, and then just last week we granted permission, obviously for the same address, for signage for Domino's at that address. So those permissions have now both been granted, and the applicants have advised us that they are planning to move into that site. Thank you.
Councillor Potts, you wish to come back? Yeah.
If I may, Madam Chairman, thank you. With your indulgence, do we have, though, I mean, they're asking for 3 months. We've seen that actually they don't stick to anything they're saying so far. I have very little faith in 3 months. I know you can only go from what you're told. How have we any indication on a timescale?
From the conversations that we've had with the agent on this scheme, they think that they could be in there within 8 weeks.
Trouble as Councillor Potts says, this is really all hearsay, and it's a thoroughly unacceptable use on this particular piece of land. So, that's our dilemma. Are we generous to them and give them the time, or do we say no, go and find somewhere else? It's not as though there aren't premises in Farnham that are probably more suitable, but that's up to the committee to decide. Did anyone indicate? Councillor Fraser?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. It's only on very rare occasions I find myself agreeing absolutely with Councillor Potts. And in this case, there has been a great deal of inconvenience and objection by the local residents to the noise, which has been reduced, the smell, which hasn't, the danger of the delivery vehicles entering what is the busiest portion of Farnborough Road, close to the church, and generally the unsightly appearance of these units in the middle of what is an area of great landscape value. Whilst we should encourage local businesses, I think this particular local business has had more than enough largesse. They knew the Woolmead was being demolished and did nothing to find other premises that I know of. And this was an instantaneous parking of these vehicles some 6 months ago. And I'm always very wary of retrospective approvals, and 3 months strikes me as being, in the circumstances, the absolute maximum that should be granted. Just to give them time to put their stuff together and take it away. If they can find permanent residence in the Woolmead, in East Street, opposite the Woolmead, then fine. They should, for the first time, do something constructive in a hurry and comply with the limitations that we've put on it. And I think 3 months is generous. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fraser. We seem to be getting a little bit repetitive here, so if we could concentrate on new points. Councillor Ward.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I will try. It says clearly in here that there's not going to be any additional traffic because there won't be any collection, and we have a thing called a vending trailer. My question is, what is a vending trailer if it's not selling things? And are people going to be buzzing up and down there collecting things? However, just picking up, I'll try not to repeat on what's been said before, it was quite clear that there was plenty of notice that they were going to be chucked out of the Woolmead. Since they've managed to be there for 6 months so far without getting chucked out, presumably if we give them 3 months they could stay another 6 months after that before we chuck them out. Is there a way of asking for a deposit for good behaviour from them so that if they don't go at the end of 6 months it is forfeit and they have a financial incentive to obey the rules?
There's a new one for you. Could you also just advise me on whether there's a sort of minimum period that would be reasonable to ask? You know, can we do less than 3 months while you're answering Councillor Ward's as well?
Firstly, in response to Councillor Ward's comment, unfortunately the planning regulations wouldn't allow us to request that. And in relation to the amount of time, it's open to the committee to reach their own conclusion on what would be reasonable. It is clear that there is harm. The officers have clearly identified that in the report. So should the committee decide that 3 months is too long, but a shorter amount of time to enable them to relocate efficiently, then it's open to the committee to come to that conclusion.
I'll take you, Councillor Potts, but I do have a list of speakers. You're on. No, sorry, you're on the list. Councillor Potts, did you wish to say something?
I would be happy to pick up on Miss Yandel's point to look at a shorter period of time. I think something needs to happen to focus their minds. As Councillor Ward said, we could have them there for 3 months, 6 months, whatever. I'd be prepared to suggest, and I don't know if anyone would be prepared to support me in this, that they have 6 weeks. I think that's more than reasonable. We've been more than reasonable. We need something to focus their minds. We know where they're moving to, and they can move forward with that more swiftly. And if they need to have extra expense and manpower in that, converting those premises, then so be it.
6 weeks was what I had in mind, so I'll happily second your proposal. So, Councillor Hodge.
Thank you, Chairman. If we refuse the application, how long have they got to get out?
3 months, probably.
Well, they are currently on the site. They don't have planning permission. If we refuse the application, enforcement would then need to look at enforcing the site. That isn't a quick process. They would need to do land registry searches. They would need to draw up an enforcement notice after concluding whether it's expedient to take enforcement action. It can be a lengthy process. I wouldn't be able to confirm the exact amount of time. Furthermore, if they chose to appeal the decision, then enforcement would not proceed with enforcement action while the appeal is current, as is sort of set out in planning guidance. So it could be a lengthy period of time, and it may strengthen the council's position to actually specify a date in a condition.
It's not only perhaps not efficient in terms of time, but it's also costly. Whereas if you put a fixed time and a short time, then, as you say, as I think Councillor Potts says, it focuses the mind and we get a decision. But that's entirely up to you. Councillor MacLeod?
Thank you, Chairman. My concern was that we were putting ourselves in a weaker position by giving planning permission, but Louise has explained that perhaps it doesn't. My suggestion was actually that we do it through enforcement by saying to them, we're going to give you 3 months to get out, and if you don't get out, you will suffer the consequences. The Farm Society circulated to all councillors a paper described as planning beaches, no more leniency. And that actually describes how councils like us are in a much stronger position now if we don't give planning permission and we do enforcement. But perhaps what Louise has said indicates that wouldn't be the right thing to do. So I would support what Councillor Potts is saying, that perhaps 6 weeks is the better option. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor MacLeod. I mean, we do know they have other premises, so we're just, as Councillor Potts says, getting them to get on with the new premises more quickly, perhaps, than they might have done.
I can add one more point, Chairman. I have noticed that work is going on at the premises. If you walk by that premises, they have actually started work on it. So that's hopeful.
Yeah, it's just the speed that worries me. Councillor Hyman?
Yeah, thank you. This is odd, isn't it? Because I'm very concerned that to a lot of members of the public, our residents, this looks like a failure of enforcement on Waverley's part, and I don't really want it to look like that. As far as I'm concerned, I know the planning system doesn't really work that way, but in life, we should not be rewarding unacceptable behaviour. I agree entirely with Councillor Potts in that respect, and strangely, I disagree with what Scott and a few others say in suggesting that we should give them some time. I think that we should take a principled stance on this and say to them, no, and let's enforce. You know, we shouldn't be allowing this, as far as I'm concerned. It's, there are so many reasons, and Councillor Potts went through plenty of planning reasons, I think, which I believe would stand up. You certainly haven't indicated that they wouldn't if we wanted to refuse this. I don't think that we should be forced into a position, but the fact that you know, there's financial issues and that sort of thing, I think we should take a principled position on this one. And I think from what I've heard so far, I'm certainly going to be voting against this. I would not want to grant permission to something which you know, is completely out of order. Thank you.
Thank you. Nobody's forcing anyone into a decision. You're all free agents to vote as you wish on the recommendation. Councillor Nazir?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Could you, this owner of this Domino's Pizza, doesn't he have he's owner of 7 different Domino's Pizzas? The one in Aldershot also belongs to him? So why can't be delivery done from there? He's got franchises for 8 different companies, as I know him. And the Aldershot branch belongs to him.
I mean, we just have to. Sorry, can you turn your off? We have to judge what's in front of us. We can't really sort of
anyway,
go ahead.
I'm a pizza lover myself, along with my kids. But I mean, traffic. The delivery boys will be there, and they'll be doing deliveries on their vans or cars or whatever. So the traffic will be there, and I totally agree with Councillor Potts regarding that 4 to 6 weeks, a fixed date, if it's given, then we could use that. Thank you.
I think we seem to be drawing to either we're going to refuse it or we're going to give them a shorter time. Should we vote on the shorter time? Would that be the best way? Councillor Potts has suggested 6 weeks and I've seconded 6 weeks to give them time to move into their new premises. Can I see all those in favour of reducing the time to 6 weeks?
Oh, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
In that case, so sorry, against the recommendation?
2, that's it.
And any abstentions? No, it adds up. Right. So we have a recommendation. Now it's revised because, do we have to change the recommendation as such because we've changed the time? how do we get that into the recommendation, please, Louise?
So it would be recommending that permission is granted subject to conditions 1 and 3, which the officers have recommended, and amended condition 2, which would incorporate the 6 weeks, which would take them to the 21st of June.
Is it amended condition?
Amended condition 2.
Condition 2.
Yes.
Yeah, I've got amended condition 1. Right, so can I put the recommendation to you, please? The recommendation is really on your update sheet, because that's got the updated, or one of the updated condition. So the recommendation is that permission be granted subject to amended condition 1, which is on your update sheet, amended condition 2, which is the one that changes it to a 6-week period, and original condition 3, which is on page 88 of your agenda report. So with those 3 conditions, can I see all those in favour of granting permission for that limited period?
Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
And those against granting permission?
2, that's it.
And no abstentions. Thank you very much. Thank you for your patience and good humour. It's a long, sticky evening, and safe journey home.